Hello, my lovely, and welcome to episode 46 of the Prosperous Yogini Podcast. And it's a really different episode today. I am actually going to teach you a Yin Yoga class. So you absolutely will be able to follow along to the audio. But if you prefer to see me and see what I'm doing as well, hop over to the YouTube channel and I'll put the link in the show notes. So the theme of today's class is self-care, your body, you matter. And this is linking back to a few episodes ago when I was talking about keeping your practice alive. So often as yoga teachers, and let's be honest, the majority of us at this present moment in time are female. So many of us are hardwired to overgive, overdeliver, people please, and put other people's needs before our own, not just in our business, by the way. And that can look like overcommitting or not setting aside, not dedicating time for you, for things that light you up, for things that set your soul on fire and your yoga practice. And one of the most common things that people that come to me at the start of my mentorship program, one of the most common things that they'll talk about is the fact that they've lost the time for their practice. They've lost even the love for their practice. And that's why you'll see in my mentorship program, I actually run a monthly teaching clinic where that includes an hour's yoga class for the teachers in the program, as well as talking about teaching yoga, because our role as a yoga teacher is twofold: yoga teacher, yoga boss. You are delivering the service of teaching yoga and you are running your yoga business. And most of us are just one-man bands. It's just us in our business doing both those roles. And I've talked a lot recently in episodes about the skill of teaching and how teaching is teaching. And truly what yoga is sharing our love, our passion, our experience of the practice. Now, 100% we'll go through phases, times in our lives where our practice might not be overly physical. Our practice might be accepting that we can't get to our mat, maybe just setting aside a few moments every day for some breath work and time to breathe. But that experience of the practice is so integral to you as a yoga teacher, and keeping that love, keeping that passion alive. And of course, our interests, our curiosities will change. If you listen back to last week's episode, you'll hear my story, my evolution of how I went from only teaching very physical vinyasa style classes to where I am today, with an absolute love for Yin Yoga. And one of the reasons one of the things that sets my soul on fire, that completely lights me up, is surfing. I've actually surfed for 2 hours this morning. I'm so excited about this podcast episode because I need some Yin Yoga after all of that 2-hour yang, slightly cold activity. So we'll get going. It's going to be roughly about a 30-40 minute class. In terms of props that you'll need, if you do have any yoga blocks, yoga bricks, bolsters, a blanket, rolled up blanket, cushions, pillows, sofa pillows, props around you, soft props around you, grab them to hand. Otherwise, we'll get going. And we're going to start by just finding any comfortable seat. Now, there's going to be a few top tips that may be easier to see on YouTube, but nevertheless, it's still a podcast. I'm going to sit up on 2 blocks. And I like to use my top block just slightly forward of my bottom block, so it then tips forward to get that comfortable seat. So there's that double block, that top tip. Any comfortable seat. So it might be kneeling, it might be sitting cross-legged in that easy seated pose, it might be Siddhanasana, it might be lotus, half lotus. My knees, my princess knees as I call them, don't like that lotus shape. So any comfortable seat for you, and just take a moment where, however you're sat, to have a little wriggle. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice I've just picked up some egg timers. I love these egg timers. I'm not very good at wearing a watch. I actually don't really like having anything on me. You won't see me very often wearing watches, bracelets, necklaces. I don't have my ears pierced. I mean, I just lose this stuff to start with, but I do really like having it on me. So if I I do have a phase where I know where my watch is. I'm forever taking it off. And it caused me a real problem when I first started teaching yin yoga, because I was like, okay, we're holding for 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And I was actually checking my phone quite a bit to mark the time. And then someone recommended a stopwatch. And I was like, oh, that just sounds a bit clinical, like the stop, start. Plus, I'm sure I'd lose that and forget how to operate it. So, someone recommended me these egg timers. You can get them online. They're absolutely brilliant as long as I remember to turn them over. So, coming to that comfortable seat and just have a little wriggle so you can feel your sit bones, feel that base of the pelvis there. I'm going to gently press down into those sit bones. And as we press down, feel that spine coming to length. So you're feeling space coming through the spine. And that sense of length isn't just an up energy, it's an expansion, expanding up, expanding down, maybe expanding out. So you're feeling space into the spine. Coming to rest the hands onto the knees. If you feel happy, close the eyes or maybe drop the gaze down. And our theme is this self-care, time for you, time for your practice, integral to your role as a yoga teacher. And as I said last week, with Yin Yoga, if you are a teacher that has a relatively physical teaching schedule, like maybe you're teaching quite a few classes each week and they're higher energy, what might that translate into what you're putting into your body in terms of your job energetically, and how that might look in terms of where you go with your own practice? So particularly if you're feeling very tired, low in energy, a bit burnt out, my advice to you is take up the practice of yin yoga, take up restorative restful styles of yoga, and of course then come and train to teach yin yoga with me and share that with your students. But listen, today's podcast, today's practice is all about you, so I'm going to talk about that anymore. Soften the gaze, relax the face, relax the jaw. And feeling those shoulder blades drop down the back of the body. Shoulder blades dropping down into the back of the pelvis as you root down to rise up. Let's take that attention deeper to ourselves and come to the breath. So just notice if you're on an inhale. And just notice if you're on an exhale. Just notice the fact you're breathing. I know one of the challenges that we can face with teaching yin yoga is there's these lots of pauses. The shapes are held for 3 to 5 minutes. And I'm always encouraging those I train to have some time within the hold to guide the students around the shape, but then also to have moments where you allow silence. Now, I realize this is a podcast, so you might notice today a little bit more verbal guidance. I'm going to keep checking in with you, but at any point when I do allow there to be some silence, I'll make that really clear, and I'll also make it really clear when we're coming out. So let's bring those hands to that heart center space, into this gesture, Anjali Mudra. Let's get it translated often as prayer position, which is nothing wrong with this, but actually there's something else more subtle here. So you bring the right side of the body, the inside, the sympathetic nervous system, the left side of the body, the inside, the parasympathetic nervous system. As we bring them together at the center, there's this reminder here of what yoga is. Yoga is union. Union can translate itself in lots of ways, but we think about it as union in terms of our energetic balance. As our right and our left side, as I like to think of the plus and the minus of the battery, meet in the middle. There's this reminder, this mid-ground, this mid-place, homeostasis. Let's place as we dance between the right and dance between the left, dance between the yang and dance between the yin. There's a natural rhythm, there's a natural dance. Things just feel overwhelming or tiring or too much when we're out of that balance. Take 3 breaths here. So dropping your hands down, inhale, floating the arms up and overhead. Exhale, bringing hands down through that heart center space. 2 more times. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. Arms float up. Exhale. Alrighty then. So let's come into our first yin shape. And I'm going to keep it a real traditional, very traditional yin class today. We're going to come into our butterfly shape. So in yin yoga, there's an active traditional yin, the yin purists, as they might like to be called, definite intention to move away from Sanskrit and not to use Sanskrit. So you might know this shape as Baddha Konasana, but it's a wide leg Baddha Konasana, a wide legged butterfly. So bringing the soles of the feet together. So the goal is not to have the knees coming to the earth. This is an external rotation. And whenever we come into an external rotation with the thigh, be very mindful that our knee joint feels supported, feels spacious. This is the first thing. When the thigh bone externally rotates, if we take it beyond its natural range of motion, take some twist, some torsion into the knee joint. And the knee joint doesn't like that. Knee joint certainly likes a bit of space. So never practice, I don't care what style of yoga it is, never practice through any niggles of discomfort in the knee. Like, that's like my top tip. As a young, in my early 20s, mid-20s, maybe even later than that, I did not pay attention to my knees, and I definitely now have to. So I'm going to choose to put some blocks, yoga bricks under my knees. If you find the knees are very high, it might be like to grab a bolster and bring a bolster under the knees. Another big top tip that I have, if you are quite mobile, hypermobile, you have any issues with the knees, I like to call them princess knees. I am currently, for those of you listening to the podcast, rolling up a blanket, wrapping this blanket over and under my ankles. And that, first of all, keeps my feet warm and also stops those ankles from overly rotating outwards and putting pressure onto that knee joint. So finding the hands either side of the pelvis, find a sense of length through the spine. So we pull root down to rise up. Remember, the length and space through the spine isn't just an up energy. Feel an expanding energy, an expanding sensation of space, and then bringing those hands forward and coming to your edge, your place of resistance. Our holds today are going to be around 3 minutes. And it may feel good to allow the spine to round and allow the head to drop. Now, some of you will find that head has come to the feet. Mine haven't. If you're like, where's Amy in this face? Where's Amy in this shape? Listening to the podcast. And it's absolutely fine to let that head dangle if it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, because the head weighs about a stone, it's heavy, you can put your head up onto something, rest it up onto a block or cushion. That can feel nice. Otherwise, letting the spine round and letting that head dangle if it hasn't found the feet. Checking in at all times with the knees. Paying attention to yourself. This moment of self-care. I think it's really interesting as yoga teachers. We have these stories that we should be able to do certain things, and like we're all different type body types. So some of us will have stories that we should be more flexible, and some of us will have stories that we should be stronger, or maybe have stories around both. But this idea of yoga teacher, my head should come to my feet and my knees should come to the floor. Well, that may never be possible for me anatomically, depending on the available range of motion in the hips, which is relating to my skeletal system, how the head of the thigh bone is moving in terms of space in the ball and socket joint of the pelvis. So all types of bodies are yoga teachers, and we're human too. So you're going to make different shapes to your students. I get that inquiry quite a lot, especially those about thinking about training to be a yoga teacher, and I practice for many years. I can't do this pose and I can't do that pose. And I'm like, all people, all types of bodies are needed to be yoga teachers. That's why it's great that there are so many different yoga teachers out there, and there's more teachers coming into the profession because your tribe needs you. So breathing into those places of resistance, maybe the inner groin, maybe the lower back. Checking in, you're still at that place at your edge, and that edge is a place where you can hold the shape. You're not fighting against it. Yin is very yielding. Yin is very allowing. And I like to take most of my shapes, my postures, my asanas in Yin Yoga passively. So I'm not actively engaging muscles to stretch. But with that, you need to be mindful that the joints don't get the support that they normally do when we engage through muscles. So there, you'll see me using quite a lot of props, particularly because I do actually have some hypermobility into my knee joints. Let's take one more breath here. And then slowly bring the torso up, bring the head up, use the hands to guide you up. Props to the side. Might like to use your hands to bring those knees back together. And then bringing the legs out in front of you. Now, between each yin shape, we have a moment of rebound. So it's like a moment of reset. So I'm currently circling my ankles and circling my knees. The rebound can look like a bit of dynamic movement. The rebound can also be some static movement. You can lie down into a shavasana if you like for a rebound. I've come off my block now. I'm bringing my hands behind me, lightly lifting the chest. So just taking the spine into gentle backward extension, opposite direction of butterfly, and then dropping the knees over to one side to the other. This is called our windscreen wiper. Right. The rebound often has an element, particularly in the dynamic moving rebounds, of counter pose, so taking the body in the opposite direction. So an internal rotation of the thigh here. And then let's come to our next yin shape, which is straddle or wide-legged forward fold, which I do know is a bit of a nemesis pose for some people, particularly I've noticed if you have long legs. So the first thing to do is I recommend you sit up onto something, and that can just help to roll your pelvis forward and feel that spine lifting out of the pelvis. If you're feeling very rounded in the back and the pelvis is posteriorly tilting back, definitely come and sit up onto something. The other thing to look at is, can my legs go straight? And if not, that's fine. You can actually bend the legs and come to the feet to the earth, hands in front of you. I like to think of this like a spider shape. All the legs are straight, but maybe you want to put something under the knees like a brick or a block. I tell you what, I really like a bit of support into this shape is actually I take a bolster, and it could be a yoga brick instead, and I like to bring it right up against my pelvis, so there's some support into the pelvis here. So once again, find that length in the spine, fingertips either side of the pelvis. I'm going to hinge forward at the waist with that sense of length into the spine. You find that first place of resistance, that this isn't enough. Let's not go any further. Bear in mind, we're going to hold this for 3 minutes. And then maybe you're happy to stay here, or maybe you'd like to exhale and allow the back to round and allow the head to come forward. So once again, some of you may find you've let completely forward here. And what's really interesting about those of you who have a greater natural range of motion, and you can just flop forward here, I actually would recommend that you do put some resistance against and support against the pelvis, or work against the pelvis, because when we're very, very mobile into our very, very elastic in our tissue type, can easily overextend into the joints. With my legs, this isn't a hatha vinyasa style class. So I've actually got my leg muscles relaxed, which is why some people really benefit. And sometimes I even practice like this with a block. Maybe I'll go there today. Just put 2 blocks under my knees. So my knee joints are slightly bent and my leg muscles can be relaxed. So I can stretch passively into this shape. My belly is relaxed. There's no bandha here, although that said, it's not wrong to lightly engage muscles. It's not wrong to lightly engage the core to lengthen through the spine. It's just, I really like my yin practice to be very passive, very allowing, a real contrast to the vinyasa practice I do, and of course surfing. So bringing our attention to our body, breathing into the back of the body. Once again, checking in with you, checking in with the self, paying attention, reminding yourself that you matter. And how often, as yoga teachers, are we giving this great advice to our students? Advice that we don't always follow ourselves. And we're here for about another 30 seconds. Taking one more breath. And then once again, use your hands to guide you up slowly. First of all, first moment of rebound is that spine returns to length after that forward bend, that forward flexion. And then any props that you've got, bring them out of the way. I like to use my hands to bring those legs back together. And once again, a moment of rebound. So maybe you're circling the knees, circling the ankles, or maybe the hands will come behind you, your windscreen, while I bring those feet together. Or maybe you're like, oh, I love a shavasana after every yin shape. So you've noticed so far, we've done butterfly and we've done straddle. And they aren't Sanskrit names. Yin Yoga purposely renamed these shapes so we could come to them with that beginner's mindset, with a new mindset, a new way of practicing. And it's just different. It's not better. It's not that Yin Yoga. This is the way you should take butterfly. This is the way you should take the wide-legged forward bend. It's just a different way. So last forward flexion of the spine, I'm going to come into the caterpillar, which is a forward seated bend, formerly known, if you're using the Sanskrit, as a Paschimottanasana. The props that I'm using, I'm sitting up on the blocks again, that pelvis can roll forward and the spine can lengthen. Because I'm going to practice with my legs relaxed, 100%. Going to put something under my knees. I've got a little rolled up, fold up blanket so my legs can be relaxed. And it's great this because often the prop we might use for someone who feels like there's a bit of tightness or restriction or just shortened ligaments in the back of the knee joint and the legs won't naturally straighten, they're good to have a cushion, a bolster over there or a blanket. And then for me, when my knees are hypermobile, princess slightly sensitive, the blanket under them helps give them support so my legs can be relaxed. There's no rooting through the heel and spreading through the sole of the feet. And I tell you what, when I first came to Yin Yoga and practiced differently, like I just noticed how often I instantly stood to attention through my feet and through my legs. So do just check in that I'm just actually rubbing my quadricep, my thigh muscles here, and just checking that they are relaxed, they are soft, they're not standing to unnecessary attention. And then using the hands to just lightly press the earth, either side of the pelvis. Find that length through the spine, and then we'll hinge forward. Find that first place of resistance with the length, taking an inhale and exhale, and then once more allowing yourself to come forward and allowing the back to round. We're okay with a rounded back in Yin Yoga. All right, find that we can right across the legs here, or we might find that, like me, that head is dangling into space. Once again, that might feel good. Or once again, might want to give the head, that heavy head, a bit of support, a block or a bolster. Another 3-minute hold into this shape of caterpillar. So it's not that Yin Yoga is better than a Vinyasa style class. It's not that this is a better way of taking the forward seated bend, formerly known as Paschimottanasana. I can't resist doing that. I do that all the time when I'm teaching Yin Yoga, formerly known as. But it's just a different way of practicing it. And our nervous system, when we're picking up habits, good, bad, neutral, all the time. And what really benefits our nervous system is when we do things differently, when we explore different ways of moving, different ways of approaching things. This difference, this in exploratory play, intuitively listening to our body, it's all gold dust information for the nervous system. And the reality is we need both. We need the yin and the yang in our bodies. So once more, paying attention to you, this moment of self-care, this time for you in your practice. Checking out that place of the edge where you feel the resistance, you feel the stress. And I don't mean stress as a negative stress, as in you stress onto the tissues. But it's not turning to de-stress. It's not too deep. You're not going into a place where the nervous system's starting to think, oh, we better fight against this. We better send out protection. We better grip. We better engage because this is too much. There's actually a place where you can feel the stretch, but there's an allowing, there's a softening, there's a surrendering. And that's the essence of Yin Yoga. If you first time you practice Yin, you've been doing a lot of Yang styles, you'll be like, what on earth is going on? Well, I was anyway. Taking one more breath. And then inhale slowly, using those hands once more to bring the spine back into length. And then we're going to go into my favorite rebound after forward seated bend. We're going to come into Shavasana just for a minute, not fully in Shavasana yet. So use your hands to guide you down to the earth. I mean, to lie down, either legs straight and relaxed, or if that bothers the lower back, bend the knees, bring the feet to the earth. But really feel into your spine, feel it lengthening, rippling back up into space. So you've created with all those 3 forward bend, forward flexions of the spine. And I feel like this very much is stillness of the rebound that we get from Shavasana. And you can take Shavasana as the rebound after any yin shape and every yin shape if you like. There's again no right or wrong way to do it. But for me, this is definitely a moment of resetting and reprogramming, taking in the information that we've just been putting in. You might be able to feel into the echo, feel into the energy of those 3 forward bends, those 3 forward flexion of the spine. And the slower pace of yin does give us an opportunity to really pay attention to what the feelings and sensations that arise in the body. And so often when we're teaching yoga, paying any attention to our body, hands on heart, like few times that I've injured myself doing yoga, 100% has been just doing something while I'm teaching and just not paying attention to my body. But if I can tell you all the things that have gone wrong for me and you can learn from them, I am more than happy for that. Okay, so we're going to come into our next yin shape. We're going to come into the cobra, which for some of us might move into the seal shape. So rolling over onto your front. A prop that you might use is a bolster or cushion under the chest. But let's explore first of all how much we're going to come up in terms of extension. So we want elbow under the shoulders or thereabouts. Now this is a challenging one because I'm going to invite you to practice passively in terms of relaxed leg muscles, relaxed glutes muscles, relaxed tummy. And it is obviously a compression into the lower back here. And if that feels too much for you, then it might be you want to gently lift navel to spine and gently hug the muscles to the bone. Now, if you're like here and it feels too much compression, you can slide those elbows further forward past the shoulders. You can even make a pillow with the hands, forearms on top of each other, head to the hands. What I really like to do is get a bolster in order to be able to be passive into this shape, is get a bolster under my ribs. So it gives lots of support so I can come into that spinal extension without feeling too much de-stress, without feeling any de-stress, sorry, into the lower back. It feels supported. I can feel the stretch, but it's not too much because I've got the support of the bolster. I really like to do my cobra like this. Now just feel like you're using the arm bones, the shoulder blades to drop the shoulders away from the ears and then just check in with the head, the position of the head and the neck. So one thing I see a lot, both in teachers and practitioners, is this head being thrown back, looking up too much. So when we take the gaze up, so don't even move your head, but take your eyes up and notice what happens to the tissues in the back of the neck. They get tighter, okay? And we might be looking up thinking, oh, I'm in my backbone now. Then take the head up and notice what happens to the tissue in the back of the neck. They're shortening here. So this is muscles working. This isn't yin. This is muscles working to hold the head up. So soften the chin into the throat center space. I don't really care where the gaze goes. And just feel the tissue in the neck soft. About just about a minute left into this shape. And for some of you, might like to come into the steel shape. So the hands are coming just off the mat to the side, and you press into the arms and lift up. So we're deepening the extension of the spine, which might feel good, which might feel too much. Remember, the theme of this class is self-care. There's absolutely no prizes for how far you come up into this shape. There isn't a category that you're a better yoga teacher if you can come up into seal. You are more than enough for your students. Yoga can be practiced by anybody and everybody as long as you just bring the joy of movement into people's lives, wherever they might be right now in this current experience. And taking one more breath. You're going to come back into another moment of rebound, which is going to be reverse shavasana, lying on our front. So bring those forearms of each other, rest the head onto the forearms, and just check that the glutes are relaxed. You might like to just gently shake the legs from side to side. Check the belly is relaxed, thighs relaxed. Check in with that echo, that memory of that previous shape. Feel the energy still in your body. We're going to move onto our back for our last yin shape, which is going to be the twist, the supine twist. So just find yourself coming back to the back and finding this shape of constructed rest, which is feet onto the earth, knees bent. I love that. I love that pose, the name of that pose, constructive rest, because so often we don't value rest. We don't value going slower. So when it can be called constructive rest, we're like, yes, I need this. And then bringing one knee and the other knee into the chest, hands and knees, and just gently rock from side to side as you massage this lower back. We're going to use our right leg, just so you know where we are. For those of you that are listening onto the podcast, listening to the audio. So from here, you're going to drop your knees over to the left. I'm just making space. Drop the knees over to the left. The free arm, your right arm can come into this cactus shape, which is upper arm and elbow out at shoulder height and hand behind you, palm facing up. Your other free arm, your left arm, can come to the top of the right knee. So that's like the full expression of the pose. That variation, or this variation, might work for you. Other options, maybe the pelvis needs a bit of space. So you're putting a block or cushion or bolster between the knees. Maybe the shoulder, the right arm, doesn't like this cactus. You want to be able to give all the weight of the right arm to the earth, and your shoulder is fighting against that. Then what I recommend is you bring that hand further down the body, even bringing the right hand to the right ribs. Even put some cushions or props underneath the shoulders. This supine twist should feel really grounding, really yielding. You're not having to do anything here other than surrender the weight of the body to the earth. It's so yin, so passive. The earth is completely holding you. The only job you have is to put yourself in a shape, put yourself in a position where the earth can hold you. Once again, there's no goal here. There's no goal in terms you're working your way towards this. All we're tapping into is sensation, the self. What is right for my body in this present moment in time? Do I treat my body how I invite my students to treat their body? And I do really get that feeling of like, having to uphold this yogic way of being. And I do gently remind you all, as yoga teachers, we're also human beings. And when we succumb to some of the challenges of being human, perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable, but also we can share how yoga supports us through those moments. So we don't always have to be happy. We don't always have to feel high energy and healthy. We don't always have to feel imbalanced, because sometimes we do feel out of balance. Sometimes we do wish we had more time for our practice. Sometimes we do need to eat differently. I don't say better there. Let's take one more breath and then coming back to center. Let's take a moment of rebound, so repositioning yourself and rebounding again into Shavasana. Sometimes we do need to prioritize a bit of self-care or a few hours of extra sleep. If you've got young children, ignore that. It used to annoy me so much where you've got that advice to just 8 hours sleep a night, and I had young children that were waking up a lot. I'm like, well, that ain't never going to happen. So let's take this over to the other side. You might want to bring the knees into the chest, bring the hands to knees, and just gently rock from side to side. And then dropping the legs over to the right now, and bringing that top hand, right hand to the top of the left leg, and that left arm coming into cactus shape, if that works for you. Maybe the pelvis needs a bit more space. Perfectly normal, perfectly understandable. So you might want to put a blanket, a cushion, a bolster between the pelvis. Maybe the arm doesn't feel so good into cactus. And more than likely, this side is going to feel different to the other. So we can fall into stories, and I was very guilty of this story, and I see it in my students as well, of having a good side and a bad side. I'm going to use the example of my right hip versus my left hip. So for many years, I would say that my right hip was my good hip and my left hip was my bad hip. Now that actually was translation for my right hip would externally rotate more readily, more easily than my left hip. So I could get into half lotus. I looked better in Janu Siddhasana on the right side. And the minute I started to pay attention more to myself, stories, and the more I learned about the human body and anatomy, I was like, look, there is just no humanly possible way that my right side and my left side are going to be the same. But that's actually not the goal of the practice. The goal of the practice is to bring balance to the system, energetic balance, emotional balance, physical balance, spiritual balance, just balance to your energetic system, the physical one that can be felt, the internal one that you feel, the energy one, the field that you operate in. But ultimately, it isn't about balance between my right and left side. They're going to naturally be different, have a different expression. Give an example of like most of us, one hand over the other. The only challenge is when if there is an imbalance between one side physically and the other, there's the challenge, because the imbalance will be creating some form of de-stress. But ultimately, it wasn't the case that my right hip and left hip were different because the right hip was a better hip. It was just simply, it had a naturally bigger external rotation. So paying attention to the stories that we tell ourselves, paying attention to ourselves, that's self-care. We matter, our practice matter. So let's unravel, coming back to center, bringing those knees into the chest one more time. I'm going to invite you to get comfortable into Shavasana. So that might look like a bolster under the knees. It might look like grabbing a blanket. But coming to lie down for that final moment of reset, that final moment of rebound. We traditionally see Shavasana as something which we're led down, either something under the knees like a bolster or leg straight. But I want to just plant a seed that maybe for you, maybe for your students, they might be more comfortable led on their side, led on their front. So when we're thinking about shapes, we're thinking of the purpose of the shape. With Shavasana, we're looking to bring the body into a resting state, so the muscles aren't needing to work. The best possible situation that we can achieve in that given moment. Where is it that I can fully surrender the weight of my skeletal system, fully surrender the weight of my bones to the earth, and invite the tissues, the muscles, the fascia that are wrapping them to go with them? You might feel comfortable and happy to close your eyes and just coming back to that felt sense of you, the felt sense of your body. As the front body melts to the back body and the whole of the body melts to the earth. So Shavasana is it's a quiet moment. And as a teacher, I think we should definitely guide our students in. I'm going to actually take you through that verbal instructions that I have. So there is that invitation to get comfortable, first of all, that invitation to use any props that allow you to feel more comfortable, that invitation to lie on your side, your back, your front, wherever you're going to be most comfortable. And when it comes to the face, let go of that expression in the face, relax the jaw. Allow the tongue to rest on the soft palate in the mouth. And as you let go into the face, let go into the jaw, let go into the tongue, it's like it signals that intention, that energy through the rest of the body. And you soften into the shoulders, soften into the heart center space, soften into the belly, and allow the breath just to gently rise and fall. Softening into the glutes, into the pelvic floor. Softening into the thighs, those quadricep muscles, just relaxing and softening those tissues at the front of the thigh. Softening into the knees, calves, all the way down to the feet. Let the sole of the foot be soft. When you've done the best you can physically to surrender, to let go, knowing that's enough, knowing that you're perfect. We are imperfectly perfect. Well, the invitation here sometimes is to still the mind. Right? Topic for another day, but the human brain, we're not designed to have an absence of thoughts. When Patanjali talks about the chitta-vritti, the noise of the mind stuff, he's not suggesting that we have an absence of thought, but we have an attention, a control of that thought. We're aware of our thoughts. We're mindful of our thoughts. We're not getting attached to negative thoughts, repetitive thoughts, thoughts that aren't true, because our beliefs are simply thought that we've thought for a long time, that we've repeatedly thought. Our thoughts become beliefs, our beliefs inform our actions. As we bring our attention to the self, feeling your energetic body lying here, feeling your breath coming in. The last minute of today's class, today's podcast, just be with your breath and be with your body. And then I'm gonna leave you. You might want to stay here, or you might want to start to bring yourself out. But this is the end of the Prosperous Yogini podcast. I think it's episode 46. I'm losing count. We're heading towards that year anniversary. Thank you so much for practicing yin yoga with me today, listening to the podcast. I hope it's been useful. It's like the first episode really where I've started to give some teaching advice. And if you like this and you want more of this, I'm totally happy for that as well. I'd also like to bring your attention to the fact that I've got a new thing. I have just put together a free, it's only 30 minutes, free yin yoga teacher training taster video. So if you've been following up my yin yoga training course, if you've been listening to the last few podcasts, you're like, you know what, Amy, you're right. I would love to bring some yin yoga into my life, into my body, into my practice, and to my students. And the sound of your online, flexible, practical, supported yin yoga teacher training course, I need that in my life. Okay. I have created a 30-minute taster so you can see what it's like to train with me. And without giving too much away, you will also unlock a special offer, a special time limited offer. So I'll put the link to that in notes so you can sign up, particularly if you've been thinking about training with me. If you have any questions about my yin training course, please just get in touch. And if there's anything on the teaching front that you'd like me to cover, please do get in touch. I would also just to nudge you into like, pay attention. At the end of May, on Friday, the 26th of May, the doors to my mentorship program are reopening for about 10 days. And I'd really like to invite you in. One, because it's at the price of $695. And this is the last time I'm going to see it at this price. It will be going up because it's an absolutely incredible price for what you get, which is monthly live coaching with me, monthly teacher class, individual support. So I'll support you individually. I use WhatsApp for voice messaging support. We also have a community space where you can ask for questions. Also send me websites, copy. I've been helping a lot recently with those in my mentorship program, helping them build their websites, refine their websites. Been checking videos that they're then going to post on social media. So there's lots of personal support alongside the group work. And there is a self-study program with 6 modules that literally take you through every single aspect of being a yoga boss. So how to run your yoga business. And then there's some bonus modules, which includes my yoga library, over 100 classes. So the mentorship program helps you with those 2 roles, being a yoga teacher and a yoga boss. Getting amazing results for everyone that's come into the program so far, regardless of the stage of their business, whether they are newly qualified, just starting, or whether they're a bit more established. And we've been working on creating online memberships, setting up programs, training programs, mindfulness courses, you name it. It's happening, and I'd really love you to be part of it. So do put it in your diary. I'm going to sign up to Amy's mentorship program at the end of May at the price of $695, because when it reopens in the autumn, the price is going to go up. And on my days, $695 is an amazing price for what Amy is offering, which is the opportunity to create a sustainable, impactful yoga business and get some support on my teaching and my practice. All right, my darlings, I will see you all next week.